there. Look at that. Well, it looks like we're live. Indeed, it's after 2. I know. I said it's running late because I'm doing a bunch of this living on a prairie stuff. I'm doing all this stuff. So I'm like so busy. Yes, Pamela Bob and her show Living on a Prairie that I am in, and Charlotte Stewart, Miss Beadle, is in. We are taping more interviews now. Sunday. At noon California time, 3 o'clock Eastern time. They're showing the episode that I'm in, and that Charlotte Stewart is in, and then there's going to run interviews with us. But coming up, the last one is going to be on the 21st, and they're going to have interviews with like a whole bunch of people from Little House in the Prairie. Epic, enormous, cray. And so, yes, I was taping that. I was hanging out with a bunch of my prairie posse and doing interviews, and it was really fun. But I am here. And I have my tin cup of milk. I'm in my living room. It is Alison. I have a variety of cookies today because, I still have a ton of those peanut butter chocolate chip things I made. I still got a few of the oatmeal raisin I made. And I have a couple of the jammy Dodgers that Barnaby sent me from England left. So, oh, snackage. So, what is today? Today is Saturday. And today is Saturday, June 13th. And look at it. So, there's really good stuff here. National Sewing Machine Day. You should check in with Charlotte Stewart. She's making those beetle bags. National Rosé Day. A little cocktail there. National Weed Your Garden Day. I suppose I should do that. Too many weeds growing up. Random Acts of Light Day. That's like every day here. We like that. National Kitchen Klutzes of America Day. Are you a kitchen klutz? Are any of you kitchen klutzes? Do you not cook? Are you a klutz in the kitchen? Because I'm working on teaching people to cook. That's going to be a thing. I'm thinking, who's going to do the cooking? There's some videos, a little thing, maybe some aprons, cookbook, help you guys out. Because weirdly, bizarrely, yes, I can cook. I know Nellie could. Nellie was the ultimate kitchen klutz. But I am not. So, jammy Dodgers, yes. I'm going to have a bite of my jammy Dodger. It's chewy. Jam it. And now, well, here we go. So, we are reading chapter 4, which is the happy days. Because things are going well. They're like, back in the house. But Ba finally, got a roof and floor and finished the house, so they have more than one room. Good of him to do that. And it's spring and nobody's starving, so things are good. Someone's a kitchen klutz. I will get you. I will. Oh, you don't cook. You need cooking videos from me? I will teach you all to cook. Done. Let's just make this happen. The happy days. Pa said that the town was growing fast. It was. New settlers were crowding in, hurrying to put up buildings to shelter them. One evening, Pa and Ma walked to town to organize a church. That's why they got everything else, right? To organize a church, and soon a foundation was laid for a church building. They're like building to cement. A lot of that stuff's still there. Oh, there were not carpenters enough to do all the building that was wanted, so Pa got carpenters' work to do. Every morning, he did the chores and walked to town, taking a lunch in a tin pail. He began working promptly at 7 o'clock. Wait, I'm not wearing my bonnet, right? This is a Minnesota bonnet. The Minnesota and Missouri bonnets are now correctly displayed on the page of my thing. So we have that. And there's little purple flowers, so it goes. There's little purple flowers. There are 7 o'clock. Okay, that's early, but it's not that early. Do you know my husband leaves the house at 5, and he gets up at 4, and he leaves the house at 5 a.m. to go to work. So my husband gets up earlier than Pa Ingalls. Craziness. So he goes to work at 7 o'clock by taking only a short nooning, his lunch, a short nooning. He was through work at 6:30 and home again for a late supper. And every week he was earning $15, which is a lot of money there. So there you go. That was a happy time, for the garden was growing well, the corn and oats were thriving, the calf was weaned so that now there was skim milk for cottage cheese, and there was cream to make butter and buttermilk, and best of all, Pa was earning so much money. They have cow, yay, milk, yay, wait, yay, milk, I have milk, yay, milk. Fabulous. Okay. Often, while Laura worked in the garden, she thought of Mary's going to college. It was nearly 2 years since they had heard there was a college for the blind in Iowa. Every day they had thought of that, and every night they prayed that Mary might go. The sorest grief in Mary's blindness was that it hindered her studying. She liked so much to read and learn, and she had always wanted to be a school teacher. Now she could never teach school. Laura did not want to, but now she must. She had to be able to teach school as soon as she grew old enough to earn money for Mary's college education. Never mind, she thought while she hoed. I can see. Now, here's the thing. Laura didn't want to teach, and as we saw on the show, she did indeed teach school, and she does teach, and she was pretty darn good at it. But Mary wanted to teach. Now, in real life, Mary did wind up going to a school for the blind, and she learned to take care of herself and read Braille and do all sorts of clever things. But she did not become a teacher. But they talk about her wanting to be a teacher so bad all the time in this book. And Laura even said, grief that Mary's not going to teach. So I think when people say, well, the show, you changed so many things on the show. I mean, Mary, she suddenly goes to this school. She's teaching at a blind school, and she meets this gorgeous guy who happens to be a blind teacher, and she gets married and all this stuff. And they're like, this is not like, but it's sort of a wish fulfillment. Laura wanted Mary to teach, and Mary wanted to teach, and that didn't happen in real life. So on the show, hey, we let her become a teacher. So, kind of like bonus things. It kind of works out. So she did want to. So it was sort of a little Laura wish fulfillment we snuck in. She saw the hoe and the colors of the earth and all the leafy little lights and shadows of the pea vines. She had only to glance up, and she saw miles of blowing grasses, the far blue skyline, the birds flying, Ellen and the calves up on the green slope, and the different blues of the sky, the snowy piles of huge summer clouds. She had so much, and Mary saw only darkness. She hoped, though she hardly dared to, that perhaps Mary might go to college that fall. Pa was making so much money. If Mary could only go now, Laura would study with all her might. She could work so hard that surely she could teach school as soon as she was 16 years old, and then her earnings would keep Mary in college. They all needed dresses. They all needed shoes. And Pa had always had to buy flour and sugar and tea and salt, and salt meat. There was the lumber bill for the new half of the house, and coal must be bought for winter. And there were taxes. Yes, even then, boys and girls, death and taxes, baby, there's still taxes. But this year, there was the garden, and the corn, and the oats. But year after next, almost all they ate could be raised from the land. Well, if it doesn't snow, and they don't have locusts, and they don't, somehow have some disaster again. Not good. All right, so all I get raised from the land, which would be good, if they had hens and a pig. They would even have meat. This was settled country now. Hardly any game was left, and they must buy meat or raise it. Perhaps next year Pa could buy hens and a pig. Some settlers were bringing them in. They've already got a cat. Yeah, that's right. He would hunt all the time. Rabbits, turkeys, a deer. But they're near town. I mean, if he walks out far, he can get a few rabbits easily. But he'd have to go quite some distance before he's going to shoot deer or elk or something. Because there's a lot of people around. They've moved on. One evening, Pa came home beaming. Guess what, Caroline and girls, he sang out. I saw Boast in town today, and he sent word from Mrs. Boast. Now, the Boasts are really nice, and the Boasts are cool. They're good friends. She's setting a hen for us. What? She's setting a hen for us? Oh, Charles, Ma said. As soon as the chicks are big enough to scratch for themselves, he's going to bring us the whole batch, said Pa. There you go. They've selected a hen and said, that one's yours. The next whole set of eggs she lays, those chickens, boom, got your name on them. They have set a hen. Oh, Charles, that is good news. It's just like Mrs. Boast to do it, too, Ma said thankfully. How is she, he say? Said she's getting along fine. been sick. She's so busy, she hasn't been able to get to town this spring, but she's certainly keeping you in mind. A whole setting of eggs, likely 12 or more young chicks, said Ma. That not many would do that. They don't forget how you took them in when they came out here just married and got lost in a snowstorm, and we were the only settlers for 40 miles. Pa reminded her. Boast often speaks of it. Pshaw, said Ma. Pshaw, said Ma. There was nothing, but that was nothing. A whole setting of eggs. It saves us a year in starting a flock. If they could raise the chicks, if hawks or weasels or foxes did not get them, which you totally know is going to happen, some would be pullets that summer. Next year the pullets would begin laying, and then there would be eggs to set. Year after next there would be cockerels to fry, more pullets to increase the flock. There would be eggs to eat, and when the hens grew too old to lay eggs, Ma could make 'em into chicken pie. Sounds brutal but delicious. And if next spring Pa could buy a young pig, said Mary, then in a couple of years we'd have fried ham and eggs, and lard and sausages and spare ribs and head cheese. Do you know what head cheese is? Ooh. Head cheese is you boil a head, usually a pig. I think there's beef head cheese too. I think they boil cow heads, but primarily you boil the whole like pig's head, and all the little bits come off the head, all that meat. You drain it, and you grind it, chop it up real fine, and then you put stuff in it, peppers and whatnot, and then you make like a loaf, like a sausage kind of thing, and slices. Head cheese. It's disgusting. But my dad, he grew up on a farm, and yes, head cheese. And he's like, head cheese. I'm like, ew. And they slaughter pigs. Oh, they also used to make blood sausage. My mom made the best blood sausage. And I'm like, ew. Just ew. But yes, when you grow up on a farm, head cheese is like big treat. And I am totally grossed out, but there you are. So head cheese. Bleh. And Grace can roast the pig's tail, Carrie chimed in. Why? Grace wanted to know. What is a pig's tail? Carrie could remember butchering time, but Grace had never held a pig's skin tail in front of the cook stove grate and watched it sizzling brown. She had never seen Ma take from the oven the dripping pan full of brown, crackly, juicy spare ribs. She had never seen the blue platter heaped with fragrant sausage cakes. Oh, not spoon their red-brown gravy onto pancakes. She remembered only Dakota Territory, and the meat she knew was the salt white fat pork that Pa brought sometimes. But yes, Laura and Mary and Carrie, and they inflated the pig's bladder and played ball, and it was so disgusting. Ew, but yet they love that. They love that stuff. But someday they would have all the good things to eat again, for better times were coming. With so much work to do now and everything to look forward to, the days were flying by. They were all so busy that they hardly missed Pa during the day. Then every night there was his coming home, when he brought news of the town, and they always had so much to tell him. Well, that kitten was just hysterical. All day they had been saving a most exciting thing to tell him. They could hardly expect him to believe it, for this was what had happened. While Ma was making the beds and Laura and Carrie were washing the breakfast dishes, they all heard the kitten cry out piteously. Meow! Kitty's eyes were open now, and she could scamper across the floor, chasing a scrap of paper that Grace drew on a string. The eternal cat toy. So even in the 1800s, the greatest cat toy in the world was a wad of crumpled paper on a string. Still, in 2020, that is what your cat wants. This is my cat wants. String with a piece of paper on it. All over the way. So they have that adorable kitten that was so young. Didn't even have his eyes open, but now it's romping around. So the kitty's screaming. Grace, be careful, Mary exclaimed. Don't hurt the kitty. I'm not hurting the kitty, Grace answered earnestly. And okay, she's the young. You know how it is when the little tiny ones start going, kitty, and it's like, oh no, cat's going to get its tail pulled. Before Mary could speak, the kitten squalled again. Don't, Grace, Ma said from the bedroom. Did you step on it? No, Ma, Grace answered. The kitten cried desperately, and Laura turned around from the dishpan. Oh, stop it, Grace. What are you doing to the kitty? I'm not doing anything to the kitty, Grace wailed. I can't find it. The kitten was nowhere to be seen. Carrie looked under the stove from behind the woodbox. Grace crawled under the tablecloth to see beneath the table. Ma looked under the whatnot's bottom shelf, and Laura hunted through both bedrooms. Then the kitten squalled again. Ree! And Ma found it behind the open door. There, between the door and the wall, that tiny kitten was holding fast to a mouse. The mouse was full grown and strong, nearly as big as the wobbling little kitten, and it was fighting. It squirmed and bit. The kitten cried when the mouse bit her. The little tiny kitten, she's like a mouse. She's a mouse-sized kitten, and she's getting her butt kicked by a mouse. The mouse is biting her, the poor thing. Oh, no. But she would not let go. She braced her little legs and kept her teeth set in a mouthful of the mouse's loose skin. Her baby legs were so weak, she almost fell over. The mouse bit her again and again. Ma quickly got the broom. Pick up the kitten, Laura. I'll deal with the mouse. Laura was obeying, of course, but she couldn't help saying, Oh, I hate to, Ma. She's hanging on. It's her fight. She's like, wait, the kitten's winning. Let's see how this goes. Like, no. Right under Laura's grasping hand, the tiny kitten made one great effort. She leaped onto the mouse. She held it down under both her front legs and screamed again as its teeth bit into her. Oh, awful. Then her own little teeth snapped hard onto the mouse's neck. The mouse squeaked shrilly and went limp. Eee! All by herself, the kitten had killed it, her first mouse. Wow. Stupid kittens. Didn't do it. I declare, Ma said. Who ever heard of a cat and mouse fight? The baby kitten should have had its mother to lick its wounds and purr proudly over it. Ma carefully washed the bites and fed her warmed milk. Carrie and Grace stroked her wee nose and fuzzy soft head, and under Mary's warm hand she cuddled to sleep. Grace carried the dead mouse out by the tail and threw it far away. Blech. And all the rest of the day they often said, what a tale they had to tell Pa when he came home. Poor little thing. Well, they aren't naturally mousers, and she's a little baby kitten. The mouse is like bigger than her, but that's the thing. Kittens they will hunt. Her eyes, they said her eyes are just open. And this is true. George Carlin, the comedian George Carlin, actually had a hysterical routine about this, I remember seeing, where he said, cats, they're the ones, they're dangerous. And he said, okay, a human baby, if you raise your hand and make a loud noise at a human baby, they cry and cower. He said, if you make a loud noise, raise your hand, the puppy will whimper and cower and run away. He says, you go up to a kitten and go, rah, it'll go, ree. He said, yeah, kittens are ready to fight. They're ready to step outside like first day. A newborn kitten will take you on. So it's true. It's true. Even a little baby kitten will go after and will take on a mouse twice her size. And this one, if she won, that's like, yikes. Oh, man. They waited until Pa had washed and combed his hair and sat down to supper. Laura answered his questions about the chores. She had watered the horses and Ellen and the calves and moved their picket pins. The nights were so pleasant now, they need not put them in the stable. They slept under the stars and woke and grazed wherever they liked. Then came time to tell Pa what the kitten had done. He said he'd never heard anything like it. He looked at the little blue and white kitty walking carefully across the floor with her thin tail standing straight up, and he said, that kitten will be the best hunter in the country. The day was ending in perfect satisfaction. They were all there together. All the work, except the supper dishes, was done until tomorrow. They were all enjoying good bread and butter, fried potatoes, cottage cheese, and lettuce leaves sprinkled with vinegar and sugar. I guess that's what passes for a salad when you have like nothing and it's the 1800s. We got some lettuce and we put vinegar and sugar on it. Boom, salad's just been invented. Maybe get those tomatoes out of the garden, get a proper salad. Beyond the open door and window, the prairie was dusky, but the sky was still pale, with the first stars beginning to quiver in it. The wind went by, and in the house the air stirred, pleasantly warm by the cook stove, and scented with prairie freshness, and food and tea and a cleanness of soap and a faint lingering smell of the new boards that made the new bedroom. Oh, finally, they were in that, like, stuffy place out in the city, then they were in a little shack, and they almost froze. Much nicer, much nicer. In all that satisfaction, perhaps the best part was knowing that tomorrow would be like today, the same, and yet a little different from all the other days, as this one had been. But Laura did not know this until Pa asked her, "How would you like to work in town?" "What?" "Just a little different." "Yes, Dave. No. Tomorrow's not going to be the same. It's going to be different." My cat, someone said my friend's cat was yelling at a bear yesterday. Glad I don't have bears. They will. They're very brave. My cat would be like, "Bear? Okay, come here." We had this cat, Clarice, little Clarice. We had to keep her in because if coyotes, big thing with coyotes here in LA, she was like, "Let's go." She would have gone outside and taken on the coyotes, and they were huge, so we did have to keep her in and say, "No, you can't try to kill a coyote. That won't go well." It is a fight. I'll fight you. So, does Laura go to work? Yes, she does. I'm going to read you Working in Town. Chapter 5, Working in Town. No one could imagine what work there could be for a girl in town. They had the whole conversation where Ma was like, "A girl in town? If it wasn't working, it was a hired girl at the hotel." "No, it's a new idea of Clancy's," Pa said. Mr. Clancy was one of the new merchants. Pa was working on his store building. "We've got the store pretty near finished, and he's moving in his dry goods. His wife's mother's come west with him, and she's going to make shirts." "Make shirts?" said Ma. "Yes, so many men are batching it on their claims around here that Clancy figures he'll get most of the trade in yard goods with somebody there in the store making them up into shirts for men that haven't got any women folk to do their sewing." "Well, that is a good idea," Ma had to admit. Now, see, she makes all their clothes. She's sort of like, make a shirt? Why would you need to go buy a shirt? Because she's cranking out those shirts for Pa all the time. She's making all their clothes. They just buy fabric and they make stuff. And that's how they've always done it. But realizing, like, well, Almanzo and Royal, they're not married. They're batching it, as they say. And there's a lot of single men in the town. And this is back in the day when the women made all the clothes and the guys didn't know what to do. So it's like, we're going to sell some shirts. That's very smart. "You bet. There's no flies on Clancy," said Pa. "He's got a machine to sew the shirts." A sewing machine? And here it is. National Sewing Machine Day. And there's a sewing machine in the story. I'm so happy. Okay. Ma was interested. "A sewing machine? Is that like the picture we saw in the Inter-Ocean? How does it work?" I love their magazines. The Inter-Ocean. I want to subscribe to Inter-Ocean. "Almost like I figured out it would," Pa answered. "You work the pedals with your feet, and that turns the wheel and works the needle up and down. There's a little contraption underneath the needle that's wound full of thread, too. Clancy was showing some of us. It goes like greased lightning and makes as neat a scene as you'd want to see." "Well, I wonder how much it costs," said Ma. "Way too much for ordinary folks," said Pa. "But Clancy looks on it as an investment. He'll get his money back in profits." Yeah, back then, a sewing machine, unless you were going to, start making shirts for the whole town, you wouldn't buy one. Now, people have them all the time. I'll tell you who's got a sewing machine. Charlotte Stewart, our Miss Beadle. Making stuff all the time. Everybody's got like a Singer sewing machine nowadays, but it is a big deal then. "Yes, of course," Ma said. Laura knew she was thinking how much work such a machine would save. But even if they could afford it, it would be foolish to buy one only for family sewing. Does he expect Laura to learn how to run it? Laura was alarmed. She could not be responsible for some accident to such a costly machine. "Oh, no, Mrs. White's going to run it," Pa replied. "She wants a good handy girl to help with the hand sewing." He said to Laura, "She was asking me if I knew such a girl. I told her you're a good sewer, and she wants you to come in and help her. Clancy's got more orders for shirts than she can handle by herself. She says she'll pay a good willing worker 25 cents a day and dinner. Very good. Quickly, Laura multiplied in her head. That was $1.50 a week, a little more than $6 a month. If she worked hard and pleased Mrs. White, maybe she could work all summer. She might earn $15, maybe even $20, to help send Mary to college. She did not want to work in town among strangers, but she couldn't refuse a chance to earn maybe $15 or $10 or $5. She swallowed and asked, "May I go, Ma?" Ma sighed. "I don't like it much, but it isn't as if you had to go alone. Your pa will be there in town." "Yes, if you want to, you may." I don't want to leave you all the work to do," Laura faltered. Guess she really doesn't want to go. Carrie eagerly offered to help. She could make beds and sweep and do the dishes by herself and weed in the garden. Ma said that Mary was a great help in the house, too, and now that the stock was picketed out, the evening's chores were not so much to do. She said, "We'll miss you, Laura, but we can manage." See, this is so weird, because Laura didn't want to go. Pa's like, "I got you a job." And the whole family's like, "We'll do all your chores. We'll take care of everything. We'll give you a ride to town." They're like, "Yay." And she's even like, "Oh, can I go?" Ma's like, "You shouldn't go to town." Ma's like, "No, we're going to make an exception that we're going to allow you to work it down." And the whole time she's going, "The last thing I want to do is go work it down. I don't actually want to go sit in a store and sew in town. I would do anything to." But she can't. She can't let go. "Well, guess what, guys? I'll save you all a trip. I don't want to go." Because she's like, "I'm going to make the money to send Mary to college." So, yeah, it's terrible. I think in modern times, she would feel to be able... No wonder Laura, they say she was kind of cranky when she was older. There's a lot of sacrifice there. I think in modern times, she might have been able to say, "Now, look, I really don't want to go to town and don't really want to sew. So, if you say I gotta, because, Mary's going to college, I'll do it. But if you guys are bending over backwards because you think I'm like, woohoo, town, yeah, don't." She's making every possible excuse. They're like, "It's fine, we'll take you to town." There was no time to waste next morning. Laura brought the water and milked Ellen. She hurried to wash and to brush and braid her hair and pin it up. Oh, yeah, she got the big pinned up right now. Lovely. She put on her newest calico dress and stockings and shoes. She rolled up her thimble in a freshly ironed apron. She brought her own thimble down to the sewing place here. That's good. The little breakfast that she'd had time to swallow had no taste. She tied on her sunbonnet and hurried away with Pa. They must be at work in town by 7 o'clock. Morning freshness was in the air. Meadowlarks were singing, and up from the big slough rose the thunder pumps with long legs dangling and long necks outstretched, giving their short booming cry. What? Okay, I actually don't know. This is a bird? This is a thing. I don't... Thunder pumps. I don't know what a thunder pump is. But she's saying it rose up out of the big slough and had long legs dangling and long necks outstretched, giving their short booming cry. Is that like some kind of pelican? Is this a crane? I don't know. Does somebody know what a thunder pump is? Apparently it's some kind of water bird, really loud, long leg. I feel like I'm on a game show. I have no idea what this is. I gotta look that up. Wow. It was a beautiful, lively morning, but Pa and Laura were too hurried. They were running a race with the sun. Up rose the sun with no effort at all, while they kept walking as fast as they could, north on the Prairie Road toward the south end of Main Street. The town was so changed that it seemed like a new place. 2 whole blocks on the west side of Main Street were solidly filled with new yellow pine buildings. A new board sidewalk was in front of them. Pa and Laura did not have time to cross the street to it. They hurried, Indian file, along the narrow, dusty path on the other side of the street. It's the Indian files. That's cute. Now here they are walking, though, hand in hand. This is nice. This is a nice picture. There, see, they're walking along. They're all dressed up. But yeah, there's a sidewalk. Remember in the snowstorm? Can you imagine if they'd been able to find the sidewalk? There's no sidewalk. There's nothing. It's much bigger now. It would have been great during the snowstorm had it been such a huge town. On this side, the Prairie still covered all the vacant lots, right up to Pa's stable and his office building at the corner of Main and 2nd Streets. But beyond them, on the other side of 2nd Street, the studding of a new building stood on the corner lot. Beyond it, the path hurried past vacant lots again till it came to Clancy's new store. The inside of the store was all new and still smelled of pine shavings. It had, too, the faint starchy smell of bolts of new cloth. Behind two long counters, all along both walls, ran long shelves stacked to the ceiling with bolts of muslin and calicoes and lawn, chalice and cashmeres and flannels and even silks. Ooh. You know, we're so used to the show where you just have Olson's Mercantile and they have the one store. That's it. And there's talk of like, maybe you can buy something from the postmistress, paper. But that was it. And because Walnut Grove was really small. But in real life, they moved. And they moved to this other town where there was like many stores. It's a big thing. So, yeah. $1 in. Wow. Say $1 was more than $25. Wow. Oh. Man, peanut butter cookies are good. Oh, rich though. There were no groceries, no hardware, no shoes or tools. In the whole store, there was nothing but dry goods. Laura had never before seen a store where nothing was sold but dry goods. They're even specializing, because before they had like a general store, and even in Walnut Grove in the books they had more than one store. But they got grocery, and then they got like hardware. They have a hardware store, and now they have like the clothing, fabric, dry goods store. Getting fancy. It's going to be like New York. I don't believe it. At her right hand was a short countertop of glass, and inside it were cards of all kinds of buttons and papers of needles and pins. On the counter beside it, a rack was full of spools of thread of every color. Oh, those are pretty. Those colored threads were beautiful in the light from the windows. The sewing machine stood just behind the front end of the other counter, near the window. Its nickel parts and its long needle glittered, and its varnished wood shone. A spool of white thread stood up on a thin black ridge. Laura would not have touched it for anything. Mr. Clancy was unrolling bolts of calico before two customers, men in very dirty shirts. Clearly it was time for these guys to get shirts. Apparently they didn't even do laundry, let alone buy shirts. A large fat woman with tight-combed black hair was pinning pattern pieces of newspaper to a length of checked calico spread on the counter near the sewing machine. Pa took off his hat and said good morning to her. He said, "Mrs. White, here's my girl, Laura." Mrs. White took the pins out of her mouth and said, "I hope you're a fast, neat sewer. Can you baste bias facings and make good, firm buttonholes?" "Yes, ma'am," Laura said. "Well, you can hang your bonnet on that nail there, and I will get you started," said Mrs. White. I love, hang your bonnet on a nail. I need a nail to hang my bonnet on. Yeah, she's a tough old broad, but I know if you notice in Laura's book, she just comes right and goes, and so this fat lady, she's like kind of mean. She talks about like, so-and-so was an ugly man, and then the fat woman is like, harsh. Nowadays, people would be like, she's a little plump. It wouldn't go like that. And then the fat lady was running the sewing machine. They get rough again in this chapter. I should warn you, because we've had Laura Ingalls Wilder, although argued with her mother about how she felt about the Indians, the Native Americans. But there are many characters in the books who say some, like, especially Ma, who say some really mean things about foreigners, Indians. Just wait, because these people in the store are a bit rough, and they kind of get into it, and it gets a little crazy. It's not the polite life that Laura is accustomed to. City, Well, she's going to put her started. So, Pa gave Laura a helping smile, and then he was gone. Laura hoped that her trembly feeling would wear off in time. She hung up her bonnet, tied on her apron, and put her finger into her thimble. Mrs. White handed her pieces of shirt to baste together and told her to take the chair on the window by the sewing machine. Quickly, Laura drew the straight-back chair back a little way so that the sewing machine partly hid her from the street. She bent her head over her work and basted rapidly. Right, like on top of this, she has like social disorder kind of thing and she's really shy and does not like crowds and the city. So she's hiding behind the sewing machine and sewing. So it's a little difficult for her here. Mrs. White did not say a word. Anxiously and nervously, she kept fitting the pattern pieces to the goods and cutting out shirt after shirt with long shears. As soon as Laura finished basting a shirt, Mrs. White took it from her and gave her another to baste. It's like an assembly line. After a time, she sat down at the machine. She whirled its wheel with her hand, and then her feet, working fast on the pedal underneath, kept the wheel whirring. The racketing hum of the machine filled Laura's head like the buzzing of a gigantic bumblebee. The wheel was a blur, and the needle was a streak of light. Mrs. White's plump hands scrambled on the cloth, feeding it rapidly under the needle. Well, it's not even an electric. There's no electricity yet. This is not even an electric sewing machine. Margaret Hamilton said Margaret Hamilton should play Mrs. White. This is a pump one, old school, but she's going, and she is she's got Laura like sewing them together, just basting them, and then she takes it, runs it through the machine, and does this. I mean, that's pretty fast. You can do that. But she's really pumping that. That thing is going as fast as an electric machine. That's amazing. Laura basted as fast as she could. She put the basted shirt on the shrinking pile at Mrs. White's left hand, seized pieces of the next one from the counter, and basted it. Mrs. White took basted shirts in the pile, sewed them on the machine, and piled them at her right hand. There was a pattern in the way the shirts went, from the counter to Laura to a pile, from the pile to Mrs. White, and straight through the machine to another pile. It was something like the circles that men in teams had made on the prairie building the railroad. But only Laura's hands moved, driving the needle as fast as they could along the seams. Her shoulders began to ache, and the back of her neck. Her chest was cramped, and her legs felt tired and heavy. The loud machine buzzed in her head. Suddenly, the machine stopped still. "There," Mrs. White said. She had sewed the last basted shirt. She's not kidding. Laura still had to gather a sleeve and to baste the armhole and underarm seam, and the pieces of one more shirt lay waiting on the counter. "I'll baste that one," Mrs. White said, snatching it up. "We're behindhand." "We're whatin'?" One word, behindhand. We're behindhand. It's a new word. And this is like Lucy and Ethel in the chocolate factory. She can't keep up. "Yes, ma'am," Laura said. She felt she should have worked faster, but she had done the best she could. A big man looked in the door. "It's her first day. She's 15. She's never even seen a sewing machine before." It's like, hey. Now, here you go. This tells you what it's like. They mentioned two men in dirty shirts, and they mentioned a rather stern fat woman with a sewing machine, and Laura basting away. Here you go. Look, there is she's pretty. She's a big girl. Yep. And there's poor Laura hiding behind the counter, and there's the two guys in dirty shirts coming in to get some clean clothes. So poor Laura's trying here. Now, a big man looked in at the door. His dusty face was covered with an unshaved stubble of red beard. He called, "My shirt's ready, Clancy." "Be ready right after noon," Mr. Clancy answered. When the big man had gone on, Mr. Clancy asked Mrs. White when his shirts would be done. Mrs. White said she did not know which shirts they were. Then Mr. Clancy swore. Laura scrooged small in her chair. Oh, this is this word that only Laura Ingalls Wilder ever uses, where she says she's scrooged down. She's scrooged down. Like, what? Scrooged down in her chair, basting as fast as she could. Still sewing, desperately. Mr. Clancy snatched shirts from the pile and almost threw them at Mrs. White. Still shouting and swearing, he said she'd get them done before dinner or he'd know the reason why. Yikes. This is like harassment in the workplace. You never have to get this now. "I'll not be driven and hounded," Mrs. White blazed. "Not by you, nor any other shanty Irish." She gives one. She doesn't take anything off him. He's swearing at her, and she says, "I will not be driven and hounded," Mrs. White blazed. "Not by you or any other shanty Irishman." So for those of you who are concerned about Native Americans being slandered and insults to African Americans and to foreigners, the Irish. We now have a character who is now insulting Irish people, just in case there was anyone left out. So, crunch. Now we're insulting the Irish. It's come to that. Okay. Shit, I believe that's my ancestors. I think my I think my grandparents, the shanty Irishmen, oh dearie me. Any other shanty Irishman. Laura hardly heard what Mr. Clancy said then. She wanted desperately to be somewhere else, but Mrs. White told her to come along to dinner. They went into the kitchen behind the store. Mr. Clancy came raging after them. The kitchen was hot and crowded and cluttered. Mrs. Clancy was putting dinner on the table, and 3 little girls and a boy were pushing each other off their chairs. Mr. and Mrs. Clancy and Mrs. White, all quarreling at the top of their voices, sat down and ate heartily. Laura could not even understand what they were quarreling about. She could not tell whether Mr. Clancy was quarreling with his wife or her mother, nor whether they were quarreling with him or with each other. They seemed so angry that she was afraid they would strike each other. Then Mr. Clancy would say, "Pass the bread," or "Fill up this cup, will you?" Mrs. Clancy would do it, while they went on calling each other names, yelling them. The children paid no attention. Laura was so upset she could not eat. She wanted only to get away. She went back to her work as soon as she could. Now, can you imagine at her house if her pa says, "Jerusalem crickets," Ma says, Charles is swearing. The profanity. You said Jerusalem cricket in front of the children. Gosh darn it. Charles, please. So it's like no swearing at her house and shouting. Somebody gets mad. Oh, good heavens. Everybody just faint dead away. And now she just had dinner with an Irish family. Yes, my family, my father. Is it that? Yeah. The Bannons and the Blythes. And so, yes, I am of Irish heritage. And yes, the idea of a group of people just screaming at each other across the table and then going, "Pass the bread, would you?" Yeah, it's kind of like Italians. Totally normal. So, yes, she just finally had Irish dinner. Poor thing. She's terrified. Mr. Clancy came from the kitchen whistling a tune as if he had just had a nice quiet dinner with his family. Probably was a quiet one. They had company after all. They were probably on their best behavior. He asked Mrs. White cheerfully how long it'll take to finish those shirts. "Oh, not more than a couple of hours," Mrs. White promised. "We'll both work on them." Laura thought of Ma's saying, "It takes all kinds of people to make a world." That's for sure. In 2 hours, they finished the 4 shirts. Laura basted the collars carefully. Collars are hard to set properly on a shirt. Mrs. White sewed them on the machine. Then there were the cuffs to set on the sleeves, and the narrow hems all around the shirt bottoms to be done. Then the fronts and all the cuff openings were to be faced. They were all the small buttons to sew firmly on, and the buttonholes to be made. They're making really quality fancy shirts with collars and cuffs and little tiny buttons on the cuff and the whole bit. While screaming and swearing at each other during dinner. Okay. It is not easy to space buttonholes exactly the same distance apart, and it's very difficult to cut them precisely the right size. The tiniest slip of scissors will make the holes too large, and even one thread uncut will leave it too small. Now, this is true. I am not a great sewer, but I can fix stuff. I can repair things. In fact, I can sometimes fix a tear in something, and you can't even tell where it was. So, yeah, not bad. And I've done the thing and get the buttons on. But I have had things where it's like a buttonhole was messed. I had to fix a buttonhole because it was frayed. Yeah, you go to fix a buttonhole. You have to sew it exactly. Or the button's never going back in again. It's very difficult. Can't mess with. You got to get the buttons. We're sewing on a button. Got to sew the button on exactly the same place. It's much harder than it looks. When she had cut the buttonholes, Laura whipped the cut edges swiftly and swiftly covered them with the small knotted stitches, all precisely the same length and closely set together. She so hated making buttonholes that she had learned to do them quickly and get it over with. Mrs. White noticed her work and said, "You can beat me making buttonholes." After these 4 shirts were done, they were only 3 more hours of work that day. I was like, how long is this going to go on? It'd take years. Man, that is long. Laura went on finishing shirts while Mrs. White cut out more. Laura had never sat still so long. Her shoulders ached, her neck ached, her fingers were roughened by needle pricks, and her eyes were hot and blurry. Twice she had to make out bastings and do them over. She was glad to stand up and fold her work when Pa came in. Okay, in essence, she is working in a sweatshop. This is why they talk about people sewing in sweatshops. What's happening here? They walked briskly. Oh, she was so glad to stand up and fold up her work when Pa came. They walked briskly home together. The whole day had gone. Oh, and now the sun was setting. "How did you like your first day of working for pay, Half-Pint?" Pa asked her. "You make out all right?" "I think so," she answered. "Mrs. White spoke well of my buttonholes." Yep. And that's then we're going to go to the month of roses is the next chapter, chapter 6. It'll be lovely. Yikes! And these the Clancys, they should have their own show. The Clancys should have their own show as Clancys, the Shanty Irish, who yell and scream at the dinner table about shirts. So they sound like fun people. And as she said, they acted like it was a normal dinner. And the reality is they probably said, well, we should probably keep it down if this young girl here is just visiting. So they probably swore less than they normally did. So hilarious. But yes, indeed, in between picking on Indians and everyone else, it's like, let's make fun of the Irish. So we just now had a make fun of the Irish chapter. It's like very even. Everybody gets insulted at some point in the prayer. Because it was written in the 1930s and it took place in the 1800s. So there was still definitely an attitude of, them foreigners and people coming over, from Ireland. So yeah, it was still a thing. It was a thing. So that's it for today. I've had such a day. I had to do my Prairie interviews and so many things. So tomorrow is Sunday. And at noon, I am going to watch the Living on a Prairie thing. It's Living on a Prairie TV, and you can go on Facebook, look for it. Well, it's been posted like mad. Pamela Bob is her name, who produced this thing and stars in it. And she's brilliant. She wrote it and created this show. And it's very clever. And so she did this thing, and I'm in this episode on Sunday, as is Charlotte Stewart, and it's awesome. And then we're interviewed. So I'm going to kick back and watch that, and then I'm going to do a reading. And then I believe I'm scheduling it right now. I may be doing one of my new Coach the World videos, because I just signed up for this thing, Coach the World, and people requested, well, I would like to talk to you live one-on-one video for 15 minutes, and so it looks like I got one. And then I got the cameos where people say, can you say happy birthday to my mom, whatever, and okay, so I gotta do those. So I'm just like a busy beaver here in front of the camera. And my show on June 25th, in that part of the room there, going to be coming up any minute on the 25th. We'll be doing that. And that will be in the living room, so we'll have another show. So stuff, things. We're just doing things constantly. It's awesome. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. So take care of yourselves. And you got like 7 tweets. Is that July? No, yeah. I don't know. But Thursday. It's a Thursday. It's the 25th. It'll be over there. Thank you so much. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Wash your hands. Wear your masks. Stay healthy. Still healthy. Someone said your bonnets are sold. Yes, but we have the new ones, the Missouri bonnets, and they're up on there. And we will have Minnesota bonnets soon.